The Galactic Council of Empires convened in its most ancient chamber, a grand hall carved from the bones of forgotten stars, filled with the murmurs of centuries-old beings who had long since forgotten the meaning of fear. Around the central table sat representatives from the mightiest species across the stars, tall serpentine creatures with scales that glittered like galaxies, towering insectoids whose mandibles clicked in a cadence of deep thought, and the cold, calculating Ethegrians, their eyes like glowing embers. They had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and now their collective gaze turned toward a species they deemed unworthy of their attention. A backwater world in the outer rim, inhabited by what they called fragile and primitive creatures, humans. The council scoffed at the recent report sent by the Terran ambassador, which argued for Earth's place among the stars. A voice, trembling with defiance and the hope of an empire that had not yet been born, echoed through the chamber. The ambassador, a young human named Julia Varn, stood before them, her words desperate and passionate. "You must understand, humanity has evolved. We are no longer the mere creatures you see on the surface. We have developed technology capable of fighting back, of protecting our people." The laughter that followed was enough to shake the very foundations of the hall. The Ethegrians, who controlled the galaxy's vast networks of trade and power, exchanged smirks. The insectoids buzzed in an unintelligible chorus, mocking the idea that humanity could ever be a threat. The serpentine creatures, their eyes narrowing in amusement, curled around their seats, clearly uninterested. "Primitive," one of the Ethegrians murmured. "A blip in the grand scheme of things," another hissed. And yet, as the laughter subsided, the council remained oblivious to the looming storm. The human ambassador, her voice shaking but resolute, retorted, "Do not mistake us for what we were. We are not your playthings. We are the future." But no one listened. Instead, the room shifted, and the council's attention returned to more important matters, such as the expansion of their empires and the elimination of smaller, weaker species. At the same time, light years away, a child was playing a game. At first glance, it seemed like any ordinary simulation. A 10-year-old boy, wide-eyed and brimming with intelligence, sat at a holographic table. His fingers moved quickly over the interface, plotting intricate strategies that no one else had ever considered. His name was Max Hunter, a child prodigy from Earth, and though the council would never acknowledge it, he was already reshaping the future. Max was playing a war game. A simulation of interstellar conquest, but not in the traditional sense. While others focused on brute force and overwhelming numbers, Max had a different approach in mind, one that incorporated strategy from Earth's past. Ancient battles, guerrilla tactics, psychological warfare. Max understood war in ways the great empires never would. While the Galactic Council sat, draped in arrogance, dismissing humanity as insignificant, they could not have known that on a small planet, in the darkest corners of human ingenuity, the seeds of a new kind of warfare were being planted. A war that would soon force them to confront the unimaginable. The game, though just a child's pastime, was about to rewrite the rules of interstellar conflict. Max's small fingers hovered over the final move. With one swift gesture, he set a chain of events in motion that no one could predict. A simulated alien fleet, powerful beyond reckoning, was about to be outsmarted. The rest of the galaxy would learn the truth soon enough. Humanity might have seemed weak, but in their hearts burned a fire that would one day burn brighter than any star. And the first spark of that fire was a human child, playing a game no one believed mattered. But it would matter more than anything. The stars above Earth had never been more silent. Humanity's greatest military leaders gathered in the war room, a high-tech command center deep beneath the surface of a mountain, where holographic maps of the galaxy flickered in mid-air. General Samantha Torres, the newly appointed commander of Earth's defense forces, paced nervously as the looming alien fleet on the outer edge of the system drew closer. The Terran forces were no match for their might, no match for the technology that far surpassed anything humanity had ever seen. It was clear, Earth had no chance. "We need a miracle," General Torres muttered under her breath. But there were no miracles left. Not with their resources stretched thin, and certainly not with the alien invaders who were already advancing on Earth's colonies. The Council's indifference had left humanity with no allies, no support. The only help they had was a single child's untested strategy, a plan derived from a game played by someone who, despite his genius, was still a child. As Torres and the senior officers gathered around the table, all eyes turned to the small projection of Max Hunter's face on the screen. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the dire situation at hand. "This is madness," one of the officers said, shaking his head. "He's a child. What does he know about war?" But Torres, after reviewing Max's simulations, wasn't so quick to dismiss him. "We're out of options. We'll do it his way." Max's plan was simple in theory but audacious. The alien fleet, massive and imposing, relied heavily on their sheer size and strength. They had dominated every planet they encountered with overwhelming force, but Max believed their overconfidence was their greatest weakness. He proposed using asymmetrical tactics, hitting the invaders where they least expected it, disrupting their communications, and striking in places where their superiority would be nullified. It wasn't about direct confrontation, it was about survival through cunning. "We can't afford to fight them head-on," Max had said, his voice steady despite the pressure. "We fight like guerrillas with precision and speed. We'll make them bleed." General Torres had been skeptical at first. But as the alien fleet approached, she saw no other choice but to gamble everything on a child's plan. Earth's fleet, severely outnumbered, was positioned to face the aliens head-on in what seemed like a suicide mission. But as they entered the battlefield, the human ships broke formation, scattering like pieces of debris in the vast expanse of space. It was chaos, a strategy that defied the rigid tactics of the alien invaders. Max's plan was unfolding in real time and it was working. The alien fleet, used to overwhelming their enemies with brute force, hesitated, unsure of how to respond. They were trained to destroy entire planets, not to deal with the unexpected, with the unpredictable nature of a species they had underestimated. And in that confusion, humanity began to strike. One human ship darted into the alien formation, taking advantage of a gap in their defense to plant a devastatingly accurate missile strike. Another launched a wave of electromagnetic pulses, disabling the alien fleet's communication network. The invaders, caught off guard by the sheer audacity of the human forces, faltered. What should have been a massacre was turning into a game of cat and mouse. The humans weren't winning, they were surviving, and that was enough. As the first alien ships began to retreat, the shock in the alien fleet's command was palpable. The leader of the invaders, an imposing figure whose eyes glowed with the cold light of 1,000 conquests, roared in fury. "What is this?" he demanded. "How are they doing this?" The truth was simple. The human fleet wasn't better equipped, wasn't stronger. They weren't even as numerous. But they had something the invaders couldn't comprehend. A spark of ingenuity, a determination to survive that no enemy could extinguish. As Max's plan continued to unfold, with each move executed perfectly by Earth's desperate forces, it became clear that humanity had done the unthinkable. They had turned the tide. The alien fleet, once invincible, was now in disarray. Their superior numbers were meaningless against the unpredictability of the human assault. The invaders' commander issued a command to regroup, but the damage was done. Earth had done what no one had thought possible. They had fought back, and for the first time, the galaxy began to wonder if this primitive species might just be more dangerous than anyone had realized. The human fleet stood on the precipice of what could be the first victory against the alien invaders, but even as the smoke of the battle dissipated, the weight of the moment pressed down heavily on General Samantha Torres. The fleet's unexpected success had shaken the enemy, but it had not broken them. The alien commander, a ruthless warlord known as HFY, had retreated, but only temporarily. He was gathering his forces, preparing for a retaliatory strike. The odds were still overwhelmingly against humanity, but for the first time, they were no longer invisible to the stars. The war had truly begun. Torres stood at the head of the command center, looking at the shimmering holographic map of the galaxy, her thoughts distant. "We won the first round," she muttered to herself, "but this is far from over." Behind her, the voice of Max Hunter broke through the tense silence. "You're right. They'll be back. But this time we can be ready." Max's voice had been calm, measured as always, but there was something different in the way he spoke now. Confidence. The war had shifted, and humanity had proven they could be a thorn in the side of their alien invaders. Still, there was a gnawing fear in Torres's chest. What happens if they bring reinforcements? We're outmanned, outgunned, and our supplies are running low. Max, who had once been a child with little more than a mind for strategy, was now advising her like an experienced general. "We don't need reinforcements. We need to make them think we have them. Disrupt their perception. It's the only way to buy us time." The plan he presented was simple: deception. The human fleet would feign weakness, draw HFY's forces into a trap, and then strike when they least expected it. "We'll create false signals, fake distress calls, make it look like we're a fleet in disarray," Max explained, his finger tracing the holographic map as he outlined his plan. "We'll play to their arrogance. HFY won't be able to resist the opportunity for a final, crushing blow. Torres stared at the plan, unsure of how it would unfold in reality. The risks were immense, but humanity had nothing left to lose. With no other option, she gave her approval. The next phase of the war would begin. The human fleet, weakened and scattered, began its deception. Ships drifted off course, distress signals broadcasted across the void, and communication lines were intentionally left open to be intercepted. It wasn't long before Hareke's fleet detected the apparent weakness. A fleet of over 100 ships, once thought to be invulnerable, now seemed on the verge of collapse. Max's strategy had worked. The alien forces closed in, ready to strike at what they believed to be the heart of the human resistance. But what they didn't know was that Earth's fleet had been lying in wait, preparing for a counterattack. Just as Hareke's flagship loomed in sight, the human fleet sprang its trap. A barrage of missiles, powered by human ingenuity and Max's calculations, struck the alien vessels with pinpoint accuracy. Hareke's forces, caught off guard and unable to respond in time, found themselves disoriented, their communication systems crippled by electromagnetic pulses. The human ships, smaller but far more agile, darted in and out of the alien fleet's grasp, striking swiftly and retreating just as quickly. The alien commander, in his fury, tried to rally his troops, but the damage was already done. His ships were in chaos, unable to mount an effective counteroffensive. The humiliation was palpable. What are these creatures? Hareke roared, his voice tinged with disbelief. How are they doing this? The answer was simple. Humanity was not the weak, helpless species the galaxy had assumed. Max had shown them that. It wasn't about superior firepower or numbers, it was about adaptability, ingenuity, and the relentless will to survive. As the alien forces retreated once again, their pride wounded more than their ships, a new truth began to spread across the galaxy. Earth was no longer just a planet of insignificant life forms. They were a force to be reckoned with. But even in the midst of victory, Max remained focused, his mind already turning to the next move. This war isn't over yet, he said quietly as the holographic display of the alien fleet's retreat flickered out. They'll be back. And next time we need to be ready for them. Torres nodded, feeling the weight of the burden settle upon her shoulders. But for the first time since the invasion began, there was a glimmer of hope. Humanity had proved its worth. The invaders had underestimated them, and that mistake would cost them dearly. The war for Earth had only just begun. The respite that followed the last battle was fleeting. In the wake of humanity's unexpected victory, General Samantha Torres knew that the hardest part of the war was still to come. The alien invaders, though disorganized and humiliated, were not defeated. They were regrouping, recalculating, and they would come again, this time with a vengeance. Earth's fleet, battered and running low on resources, had only bought itself a momentary advantage. Max Hunter, the child whose strategies had turned the tide, stood at the heart of humanity's war effort, offering solutions that were as brilliant as they were unconventional. Yet even his genius was not enough to assure victory in the long run. They'll come for us again, Torres said, her voice quiet in the command center. And next time they won't make the same mistakes. The tactical map before her displayed a vast array of alien vessels forming new battle lines at the edge of Earth's territory. Their regrouping was swift, organized, and far more methodical. Hareke was a seasoned warlord. His pride would not allow for another failure. The invasion was no longer just a matter of defeating an enemy, it was about surviving the inevitable retaliatory strike. We have to change the rules, Max said, his voice sharp with the intensity of someone who had outpaced the boundaries of human understanding. He had been studying the alien fleet's patterns, their weaknesses, their tendencies. We can't wait for them to come to us. We need to make them afraid. It was a risky plan, one that could very well lead to humanity's annihilation if it failed. But in the face of overwhelming odds, Max's strategy had one vital edge: unpredictability. The plan was simple in theory, yet complex in execution. Earth's fleet would strike first, not in one place but in multiple locations across the alien-controlled regions of space. The idea was to create a sense of chaos, to spread the alien forces thin. By striking in seemingly random places, humanity would make it impossible for the invaders to predict where the next attack would come from, forcing them to divide their attention and resources. In essence, Earth would become a ghost in the machine, elusive and impossible to pin down. If we strike hard enough, we'll force them to bleed, Max explained. And when they bleed, they'll be forced to turn back. It's a matter of survival through deception and fear. General Torres listened, fully aware of the risks. Humanity would be taking the fight directly to the aliens, pushing into their territory, a move that was both desperate and daring. She gave the order, knowing that there was no other choice. As the human ships deployed across enemy space, the first wave of attacks began. Small, targeted strikes against alien mining colonies, communication hubs, and supply depots. No capital ships, no direct engagements, just swift, surgical strikes designed to disrupt the invaders' infrastructure. The aliens, caught off guard, responded with fury. Haruka, enraged by the audacity of the human attacks, ordered his fleet to retaliate. But the humans were already gone, having disappeared into the vastness of space before the alien forces could assemble. The strategy was working, at least for the moment. The invaders found themselves stretched thin, trying to maintain control over multiple fronts. The more they tried to retaliate, the more they were forced to divide their resources, their attention. It was chaos, but chaos that gave humanity a fleeting advantage. However, the cost was not without its toll. The human fleet, spread out across vast distances, faced its own set of challenges. The small, rapid strikes were effective, but they also left the human forces exposed to retaliation. Max's plan, though brilliant, was far from foolproof. As the alien fleet regrouped and reorganized, Haruka began to recognize the pattern in humanity's strategy. He was no fool. "They think they can outwit us," he growled, watching the reports of his fleet's encounters. "But we will make them pay for their insolence." With a new sense of purpose, Haruka issued orders for a counterattack that would strike at the very heart of humanity's fleet. Each attack meticulously calculated to draw the humans into a trap. The tables were about to turn. General Torres watched the reports with a growing sense of unease. Max's plan had bought Earth a brief moment of hope, but the real test was yet to come. The alien fleet was adapting and the game was shifting. Humanity had shown it could survive, now it had to prove it could win. The next few days would decide everything. The next phase of the war had begun, and with it, a sense of foreboding that could not be ignored. Haruka's counterattack was swift and merciless, designed to break the momentum humanity had built in the wake of their previous victories. He had learned from his mistakes. His arrogance had cost him the first round, but now he was ready to crush humanity's fragile resistance once and for all. General Torres paced the command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic display of the alien fleet's movements. The reports were grim. Haruka had consolidated his forces, focusing on Earth's most vulnerable targets. The supply lines and key military outposts scattered across human space. The trap was set. "They're coming for us," Torres said, her voice tight with urgency. "This time they'll hit us hard and they won't stop." But in the midst of this dark reality, there was a glimmer of hope. Max Hunter, once a child prodigy and now humanity's greatest strategist, had an idea. His plan was even more audacious than anything he had proposed before, and it came from the one thing the aliens still didn't understand about humanity: the will to survive. "We've been playing their game," Max said, his voice steady. "It's time we change the rules." The plan was risky. Too risky, perhaps. It was a gamble that would either secure humanity's future or lead to its ultimate destruction. Max proposed that Earth's fleet do the unthinkable. Instead of retreating, instead of running and hiding as they had done before, humanity would make its stand. They would turn the tables on Haruka, using the very tactics that had confused the alien forces from the beginning. The strategy was a mirror of their earlier deception, but this time, it would be more than just strikes on supply depots and communication hubs. Humanity's forces would feign a complete collapse, drawing the aliens in with the illusion of vulnerability. The key to Max's plan was not just misdirection. It was an overwhelming counteroffensive, one that would strike when the aliens were most overextended. Earth's fleet, battered but determined, would create a series of false signals, drawing Haruka's forces into the heart of human space. There the trap would close. "We'll force them to chase us, then we hit them with everything we've got," Max explained, his eyes gleaming with a focus that only he could muster. "They'll be expecting weakness. They'll be expecting a retreat. Instead, they'll find themselves surrounded." It was a strategy that played to humanity's strengths: unpredictability, ingenuity, and an unwavering will to fight. The aliens, after all, were masters of brute force, but they had never been forced to confront an enemy that could think in ways they could not predict. And that was where humanity had the advantage. As Earth's fleet moved into position, General Torres watched with a mixture of anxiety and hope. The stakes could not have been higher. If Max's plan succeeded, humanity might just have a fighting chance. If it failed, Earth would fall, burned to cinders by the wrath of a superior enemy. The first move in the game was made when the human fleet began broadcasting false distress signals, pretending to be scattered and in retreat. The aliens responded quickly, sending waves of ships to hunt down the weakened human fleet. It was a ruse, but Hareke's forces took the bait, charging forward without hesitation. As the alien ships closed in, the human forces executed Max's plan with military precision. The trap was sprung. Human ships, long hiding in the shadow of asteroid fields and behind distant moons, emerged with devastating force. The alien fleet, already overextended and spread thin, found itself trapped in a pincer movement. The first wave of human counterattacks hit like a sledgehammer. It wasn't just the firepower that stunned the aliens, it was the audacity, the unpredictability of the human response. Hareke, who had once considered Earth nothing more than a nuisance, now found himself facing a threat that could not be ignored. His command center was in disarray as he tried to regroup his forces. "How is this possible?" he roared. "They should have fled." But the human fleet wasn't running this time. They were fighting with everything they had. The battle raged across the void, with ships darting in and out of asteroid fields, using the terrain to their advantage. It wasn't a fight for survival anymore, it was a fight for victory. As the tide turned in humanity's favor, General Torres couldn't help but feel a surge of hope, tempered with the realization that this was only the beginning. The war was far from over, and there were many battles still to be fought. But for the first time, humanity had taken the offensive, and Hareke's fleet had been dealt a blow that they would not easily recover from. The war had entered a new phase, and this time, it was humanity setting the terms. Max's gamble had paid off, but at what cost? The true scale of the alien response was still unknown, and even now, as the human fleet pressed its advantage, the question remained: would humanity's will to survive be enough to rewrite the fate of the galaxy? The galaxy had shifted. For the first time, the alien invaders, once so confident in their superiority, found themselves on the defensive. General Samantha Torres watched the holographic map flicker before her, displaying the alien fleet in retreat after humanity's decisive strike. The victory was hard-won, and the sense of relief was palpable, but there was no time for celebration. The war had changed, but it was far from over. Earth's forces had dealt a heavy blow to Hareke's fleet, but the real test lay ahead. The alien warlord had retreated, but his pride was wounded, and he was already plotting a brutal response. Humanity had proven it could fight back, but now the question was whether they could maintain the momentum and finish what they had started. Max Hunter stood beside Torres, his gaze fixed on the shimmering stars that surrounded them. His expression was as calm as ever, but even he couldn't hide the weight of the moment. "They'll come back," Max said, his voice steady but laced with the quiet realization of the war's true cost. "And next time they'll come harder. We need to be ready." The general nodded, her mind racing. She had seen firsthand how quickly the alien forces could adapt, how easily they could turn the tide when they were pushed into a corner. Humanity's first victory had been based on surprise, on a strategy that played to their strengths, but the invaders had learned from their mistakes. The next battle would be different. "How do we stop them?" Torres asked. Max looked at her, a flicker of something almost unreadable in his eyes. "We don't stop them," he replied. "We make them afraid. We make them think twice before they even consider coming back." The plan was simple yet audacious. Max's genius had always been in seeing possibilities where others saw obstacles, and his idea now was one of complete disruption. He proposed taking the war to the heart of the alien empire. "If we hit them where it hurts," Max explained, his voice gaining intensity, "we make them feel the cost of this war. We go after their home systems, their most prized colonies. We take the fight to them." The thought of humanity launching an offensive so far from Earth was terrifying, but the logic was undeniable. The aliens had underestimated Earth's resolve. Now it was time to return the favor. For the first time, humanity would fight on their terms, not the invaders. Torres hesitated for only a moment before giving the order. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. If they succeeded, they could force the alien warlord to sue for peace, or better yet, withdraw entirely. If they failed, the human race could be wiped out. But if there was ever a time to take such a risk, it was now. The human fleet, battered but still intact, began its journey toward the heart of the alien-controlled space. Along the way they encountered resistance, a scattered network of alien vessels attempting to block their path, but humanity's newfound tactics of speed, surprise, and deception gave them the upper hand. As they neared their destination, the alien forces began to regroup. Hareke, enraged by the continuing attacks on his empire, had mobilized the full might of his fleet. He had no choice now but to crush humanity completely. But it was too late. Max's plan had already set in motion a chain of events that the aliens couldn't foresee. In the heart of the alien system, The human fleet launched a surprise attack on one of their most valuable resource planets, a vital hub for their war effort. The strike was swift, brutal, and precise. Humanity had learned from their previous encounters with the invaders and adapted their tactics accordingly. The alien defenders, though strong, were no match for the human strategy. As the planet's defenses crumbled, HFY's fleet was thrown into chaos. They were forced to abandon their posts, scrambling to defend their homeworld. The shock of the attack reverberated across the galaxy. HFY, once confident in his ability to dominate, now found himself staring at the reality of a war that could no longer be won through sheer force alone. "How did they do this?" he muttered, staring at the reports of his empire's sudden collapse. "How did a species this young, this weak, become a threat we can't handle?" The answer, of course, was simple. Humanity had learned the one thing that no empire could ever conquer: the ability to adapt. And now, with the alien forces in retreat, General Torres allowed herself a moment to reflect on how far they had come. From the moment they had been dismissed by the Galactic Council, humanity had fought tooth and nail to prove their worth. Max Hunter, the child who had once been laughed at for his improbable strategies, had now become the architect of a new era. The war was not over. HFY would not go down without a fight, and other threats would inevitably rise. But humanity had rewritten the rules of war in their own image. The galaxy would never again look at Earth as a weak, insignificant species. They had become a force that could no longer be ignored, and with that knowledge, humanity stood on the cusp of an uncertain but promising future.